you know, is on the record. It's by Brian Sheridan, who's the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Drug Enforcement Policy and Support. Did I get that right? Yeah, and he'll start with an opening statement and then take your questions. Brian.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here today. I recognize some of you, others of you I don't know, and I look forward to meeting you today and answering your questions. I'm here today to update you on recent developments in our relationship with the Mexican military in the area of counter-drug cooperation. And I'll make a few opening comments, and then I'd be happy to take your questions. As you all know, on October 20th, 1995, Secretary Perry visited Mexico and met with Mexican Secretary of Defense Cervantes. This was the first visit of a U.S. Secretary of Defense to Mexico in history. The meeting was excellent and cordial, and at the end, the two secretaries agreed to form a senior-level bilateral working group to explore 4 possible areas of military-to-military cooperation. And those 4 areas are counter-drugs, force modernization, disaster relief, and education and training. The cooperation centers on equipment and training issues and the possibility and desirability of leadership visits and exchanges. No joint exercises or joint operations are under discussion. All of our cooperative efforts are based upon principles of mutual trust and strict respect for the sovereignty of each nation. The bilateral working group includes senior representatives from the Department of State and the Mexican Foreign Ministry as well. In December, all of the 4 components of the bilateral working group met in San Antonio and explored more concrete proposals in each of their areas. Since then, talks have ensued and have been undertaken on an ongoing basis. As you all know, most recently, President Zedillo and President Clinton formed a high-level contact group to discuss counter-drug cooperation. Both the United States and Mexican militaries are represented in this contact group. And President Zedillo, as you know, invited a group from the United States to come down last week. General McCaffrey led the U.S. team for the first meeting of this high-level contact group in Mexico City. I accompanied General McCaffrey on this trip. We returned yesterday. We all believe the trip was highly successful in all areas. And at the conclusion of the trip, the two sides issued a joint communique. And I would highlight for you this afternoon that communique noted the importance of training in improving our mutual counter-drug performance. Coming out of all of these discussions and visits that I've just described, I am pleased today to announce that the following agreements have been reached on training and a counter-drug leadership visit. First, on training. Beginning this Monday, 15 Mexican military officers will begin a 12-week training course in the United States. Training will take place at Fort Benning, Fort Campbell, and Fort Bragg. The objective is to enhance the skills that the Mexican military needs in order to support law enforcement in Mexico as they perform their counter-drug responsibilities. We are using a train-the-trainer concept where we will train this group of folks so that they can then return to Mexico and provide training to their own military units, which will form rapid reaction type units to support the police in Mexico as they interdict the flow of cocaine through Mexico. The training that we will be providing is similar to what we have provided dozens and dozens of times in the past to our counter-drug partners in this hemisphere and in Southeast Asia. While this is the first time we have provided counter-drug-related training to the Mexican military, it is not the first time we have provided training to the Mexican military at all. Through the International Military Education and Training Program, we have provided training and education to the Mexican military for years. I would further note that in the counter-drug arena, we have provided helicopter, pilot, and mechanic training to the Mexican police over the last number of years. We have discussed other training requests with the Mexican military in the counter-drug area, but there have been no firm decisions made to date. On the issue of a leadership visit, we're very pleased to announce that between April 15th and 19th, a group of senior Mexican military officers and foreign ministry officials will visit some counter-drug centers in the United States. In addition, they will visit Fort Bragg to observe some of the training of their military officers. We will also go to JTF-6 in El Paso, where our military coordinates all of our support for domestic law enforcement in the United States. And we will also go to Key West, Florida, to Joint Interagency Task Force East, which is USACOM's command center for counter-drug operations in the Caribbean, where we support from there Mexican interdiction efforts. We believe these exchanges will be invaluable in building mutual confidence and understanding. I would close by saying that while some of what we are announcing here today is new, it takes place in the context of already existing training relationships. And this activity takes place also in the context of both of the two secretaries' approved bilateral working group process and the high-level contacts groups that have been empowered by each of our presidents to move forward in counter-drug cooperation. I'm ready now to take your questions.
Brian, maybe my percentage is off, but I understand that perhaps up to 60% of the illegal drugs reaching this country come through Mexico. All this is very nice and it sounds great, but in the past, the main problem, or at least one of the main problems, has been corruption at all levels within the Mexican system, not just government, what have you. What is being done, if anything, to recognize that and to try and solve it?
Well, let me, I would defer to my Department of Justice colleagues on the issue of corruption in other aspects of the Mexican law enforcement effort, because they're much better suited to comment on that than I am. In terms of the Mexican military, we are just moving forward with them, and so at this time I have no evidence of corruption of the Mexican military. And given the seriousness of Secretary Cervantes and all of the senior Mexican military officials that we have met with in discussing these initiatives, I'm highly optimistic that we're going to put some programs together that are going to be effective.
I do a follow-up. We have been getting sporadic but persistent reports over the past 3 months or so that some U.S. officers, primarily Army, have been serving with Mexican military units in the anti-drug business and also anti-terrorist business. Can you say categorically, when you say no joint operations, that no U.S. military personnel have been involved?
Categorically.
Is this, the training that starts Monday, is this a one-time shot with these 15 people?
Well, we are discussing with them other training requests, but certainly this is the only one that has been agreed to and is a definite go, but there are other discussions underway. And in my view, this is a step-by-step incremental process, and I think both sides will see as we go along if this is being beneficial or useful.
How long does the training go on for?
This training is for 12 weeks.
What role would you see the Mexican military playing in attacking their country's drug problem in relation to other domestic law enforcement agencies?
We have had extensive discussions with the Mexican military on this issue, and I think their views are very, very similar to our own, which is the drug problem is first and foremost a law enforcement issue, and they therefore are in the lead. What we do, both in the United States and overseas, is support our U.S. entities and foreign entities as they assist in this effort. The Mexicans feel the same way. The Mexican military has had a counter-drug responsibility for a number of years, both in eradication, where they run some of the most successful eradication programs in the world, but they have also provided support in the past in interdicting the flow of cocaine, supporting police, setting up roadblocks, checkpoints when we believe there has been an illegal flight carrying cocaine into Mexico. So they believe they play a support role. We believe they're going to play a support role. But I would also note that the government of Mexico will decide for themselves what they think the appropriate role is for their military. And I know Secretary Perry feels very strongly that we're not in the business of dictating to other militaries how they should be carrying out their tasks and functions, but we're quite comfortable that we will see the Mexican military providing support for the police in Mexico as they take on what is a very daunting challenge, and we all recognize that.
Well, following up on Bradley's question, what sort of dent do we think that this training is going to make, given that law enforcement has the primary responsibility?
Well, I think it's too early to say, but you know, you have a problem where I think we would all agree that there are very, very significant amounts of cocaine flowing through Mexico. And our view is that anything we can do to enhance their capabilities to interdict cocaine is a good thing, and over time we will see you know, how effective these programs are.
What's been the, in the past you mentioned there's been helicopter and flight training that we've given. What's the success rate been with that?
Well, the Northern Border Response Force, which is the police element in Mexico, which has responsibility for interdicting a lot of these air flights, they have a fairly good track record. Most of their pilots and mechanics have been trained by us, and in fact the UH-1s they use were excess U.S. military helicopters, which we provided to our State Department, and they in turn have provided to the government of Mexico.
Do you have any idea how much of the cocaine entering this country comes via Mexico, and what's the commonest way for a shipment to get through Mexico?
You know, I would defer to the intel analysts and the intel community to answer that question. We believe there's a very significant amount of cocaine entering the United States across the southwest border. Everyone agrees about that. I think when you go much beyond that, you're entering into the realm of guesswork, and I don't think that's particularly useful.
Well, then how specific does the training get then?
Excuse
How
me?
specific does the training get? Does it get down to believing that it comes through mostly on trucks, and so the training will be how to interdict trucks?
They are going to, the curriculum that they have is one, to enhance the standard skill set of the use of their weapons, how to work in small groups, so that they can effectively support the police in some of these interdiction operations. They are also going to be given some very specific instruction from law enforcement, which we think will be very valuable in how to search vehicles, how to search boats, how to search buildings. So we hope that they will emerge from this with enhanced skills so that they can be safe and help the police safely enforce the law in Mexico, but also they can assist in some of these search-type activities if they're requested to do so.
So there'll be civilian police trainers involved in this on the U.S. side?
They will get some training from U.S. civilian law enforcement personnel in some of these aspects, not only of how to conduct a proper search, but also how to protect the crime scene, how not to disrupt evidence, other skills that they may need as they support law enforcement and help them perform their duties.
But they are all military. The 15 are all military people.
That's correct.
Is the traffic primarily boats and trucks?
We believe there is a significant amount of maritime trafficking. We believe there is a significant amount of ground transportation. As to the breakdown between those two, I really don't know, and I doubt anyone else does.
How much does it cost them? Training? Is it all coming out of DoD's budget?
It is all coming out of the DoD counter-drug program, and we have not yet costed it out. But this type of training we have done many, many times in the past, and this is not a very expensive undertaking. In fact, from a DoD perspective, this is about the most cost-effective thing we can do, is train a host nation so they have the capability to do the job themselves.
What sort of links exist, or are you thinking of promoting between the Mexican military and the South American militaries, particularly Colombia, Peru?
That is an issue for them to work out among themselves. We know, certainly on the political and diplomatic level, there are all kinds of contacts between those nations on a bilateral basis on counter-drug cooperation. As to contacts between their militaries in this area, I really have no information on that, and I can't really comment on that further.
Do you think that they would have more to learn from us about fighting these about fighting this than men from the South American militaries who've been in the business for a long time?
Well, I think the Mexican military will make that assessment for themselves. Maybe they'll see what kind of, how useful our training is, and then they will make a determination as to its effectiveness.
You said this is the most cost-effective thing you could do to train a host nation. Have we trained a host nation before?
We've trained many throughout this hemisphere.
In the South American area, which
Yes.
other countries?
I would rather not detail them in specific, but we've probably trained a dozen or more, and we've done some training in Southeast Asia in this area. We've been doing this for years. This type of training that we're talking about with the Mexican military, we have done many, many times before.
Excuse me. Are you in freedom to discuss about the other kinds of training that you are considering with the Mexicans, with the Mexican military? For instance, I've heard that there is a possibility of radar of detection and airplanes and airplane training at least. So, can you discuss those?
Yes, I'll be happy to discuss exactly what we're doing. And one of the reasons, in fact, I'm here today is because Secretary Perry believes very strongly in transparency on these issues. For any of you who covered the Defense Ministerial last summer, you know that that was one of Secretary Perry's real hallmarks, is that we are very transparent in what we're doing. We are talking right now to the Mexican military on exactly two things. One is this training of folks so they can have a rapid reaction capability to support the law enforcement in that way. The second thing we're talking to them about, but we have no decisions on yet, we have had some discussion about training of some helicopter mechanics and pilots for the Mexican Army for air mobility assets that might help move some of these forces around. There's been no discussion about over-the-horizon radar training or anything else.
How many UAVs do we give them, do you know?
In the past, we have provided to the Mexican police, there was an initial group of, I believe, about 30 several years ago. We provided 12 more this past summer, and that is what we have provided in the past.